Hi, boys and girls, it's Miss Pacell. Today we are going to be dividing a decimal number by a one-digit whole number. We are on lesson 6-4. We are in our book on page 319. All right, I am actually going to start with the solve and share. We have a concrete mason who has separated 107 and 25 pounds of sand evenly into 3 containers. How much sand did he put into each container? The little 5th grade helper here says, how can you connect what you know about dividing whole numbers to divide a decimal by a whole number? Show your work. All right, so here we have our little bar diagram that shows that we are creating 3 equal but smaller groups out of 107 and 25 pounds of sand. So we're just going to get right to it. The first thing that we're going to do is we are going to estimate. So if I have 107 and 25 pounds of sand and I'm dividing it into 3 equal groups, all right, I have a number, I'm just going to use 99. 99 is a number that's pretty close to 107 that I know is divisible by 3. So I'm going to get an estimate that they're going to need about, or that they're each going to get about 33 pounds. Okay. Now, I am going to show you the process and the steps for dividing a decimal by a whole number. So we're going to set it up as we do our standard algorithm. All right, let's review. We have our steps. We divide, we multiply, we subtract, we check and make sure that our difference is less than our divisor. We then bring down any numbers from the dividend that we haven't divided into yet. And then we may have to go back and repeat the steps, okay? So our little saying, does McDonald's sell burgers, kind of helps us keep those steps in order. All right, again, we're going to divide, multiply, subtract, and bring down. If we don't have a number to bring down, that is when we know we are done. All right, when we divide a decimal number by a whole number, the first thing that we need to do is we need to put the decimal where it belongs. I call it popping up the decimal. All right, I like to use graph paper to keep everything situated, and you'll see me doing that when we work through our example problems. But let's talk about our focus. Are we dividing 3 into 1? No. Are we dividing 3 into 10? Absolutely. So what that tells me when I look at my dividend, it tells me the 0 is in the tens place. So that tells me that my number is going to start with a digit in the tens place. So I'm going to have a 2-digit number with or without a decimal portion behind it. All right. Now, my estimate here helps me not only check to see that my answer is reasonable when I finish the problem, it also lets me look and think about using 3 as the first digit. If my estimate's about 33, then my answer should be something in the 20s, 30s, maybe 40s. So I'm just going to start with 3. And 3 times 3 is 9. Okay, I only divided partially into that 10, so I subtract, I get 1. 1 is less than 3. So that first digit that I used from my estimate fits perfectly. All right, I've divided, I've multiplied, I've subtracted. Don't forget, we only bring down 1 digit at a time out of the dividend, so I bring down the 7. I'm ready to start my steps again. So I always divide by the divisor. 3 will go into 17 5 times. And don't forget, that's going into the ones place. All right, 5 times 3 is 15. I subtract, I get 2. I check and make sure it's less than the divisor. I'm good to go, and I'm ready to bring down my next number, which is a 2. The steps start again. 3 divides into 22 7 times. 7 times 3 is 21. When I subtract, I get a 1. I check, it's less than 3. I'm good to bring down my 5. And my 3 goes into 15 5 times. 5 times 3 is 15. I know I'm done not because of the fact that I don't have a remainder. I know that I'm done because I don't have any more numbers to bring down. Okay, that's been our indicator. All right. Now, what we're going to learn in a little bit is we may have to annex some zeros and keep going at least to get us out to the thousandths place if our answer does not end. In 5th grade, we only work out to the hundredths place. So we'll get to that when we get there, but this is perfect. 35 and 75 hundredths pounds. All right, per container. That is close to my estimate of 33. So my answer is reasonable, okay? And then the question for the convince or the look back was, how can you estimate the answer to the problem above? We already did that, and we saw how important that estimate is. So whether we're dividing with whole numbers or with decimal numbers, that estimate first helps in so many ways, not just helping us see if our answer is reasonable when we get an actual quotient, but also helping us place that first digit in the in the quotient. It gets really dicey and really hard when you're dividing by larger numbers. This one was pretty easy because we were dividing by a single digit divisor, but we know that that's not always going to be the case. All right, let's flip over to page 320. We see our essential question. How can you divide a decimal by a whole number? And we have a visual learning example that's well worth looking at. While on a backpacking trip, Bradley hiked 23 6/10 miles in 8 hours. If he hiked the same number of miles each hour, how many miles did he hike each hour? And here is our bar diagram to show us the division that we are dividing 23 6/10 miles into these 8 equal groups. Step 1 in solving this problem is we estimate. So since Bradley hiked a total of 23 6/10 miles in 8 hours, in order to get an estimate, we know our 8 facts. A whole number close to 23 that's divisible by 8 is 24. So 24 divided by 8 gives us an estimate that Bradley hiked approximately 3 miles per hour. All right. If we use the 3 to place the first digit, it doesn't work. 8 does not go into 23 3 times because 3 times 8 is 24. But that 3 tells us then we would adjust the quotient to 2. All right. When we divide, 8 goes into 23 2 times. 2 times 8 is 16. We subtract. Don't forget, we make sure that the 7 is less than 8. Otherwise, we would have to adjust the quotient up 1 digit higher. All right. Once we've done that, and then we've gotten to the 7, then we bring down the 6. 8 divides into 76 9 times. 9 times 8 is 72. We bring down the 4. And if you notice, they waited a minute to bring up their decimal. I like to go ahead and bring the decimal up at the very beginning. Okay. Anyways, we check. When we subtract, we get a 4. 4 is less than 8. So we cannot write that the answer is 2 9/10 remainder 4. So this is the new step that we're going to do. We're going to actually annex a 0. And we bring that 0 down. Now, let's talk about that. If we annex a 0, then our dividend is 23 60 hundredths. And we know from our first introduction into decimals that 60 hundredths is equivalent to 6/10. So that is why we can annex those zeros. It doesn't change the value of the dividend. All right, so when we bring that 0 down with that 4 that we had remaining, now we have 40 that we divide the 8 into. So 8 goes into 45 times. 5 times 8 is 40. We stop right here, and we have an answer that Bradley hiked 2 95 hundredths miles each hour. Okay. Now, let's do some. So we're going to turn in our book to page 321. All right. We're going to start right here. We're not even going to estimate first because they've already placed the first digit. We're just going to get the process going. All right. So number 3, they've started it for us. If you notice, They brought up the decimal point. They're not dividing 6 into 4, so our focus is 43. They're telling us that 6 goes into 43 7 times. 7 times 6 is 42. So we've got our little starter there. You subtract, get 1. And boys and girls, since 1 is less than 6, we're ready to bring down the 8. All right, the steps begin again. So we're going to divide. 6 goes into 18 3 times. 3 times 6 is 18. We subtract, we get 0. Our answer is 7 3/10. All right, let's look at number 4. We're dividing 4 not into 3, but into 37. It goes 9 times. 9 times 4 is 36. We subtract, we get 1. We check and make sure that our difference is less than our divisor. It is, so we're going to bring down a number. Now, wait a minute. I don't know what the heck the number is that we're bringing down. All right, but I have a clue here. I know whatever it is, it goes into it 2 times, and I know that there's a remainder of 8 left over. You guys see that? All right, so you know what? I think it's 0. We bring down the 0. 4 goes into 10 2 times. 2 times 4 is 8. Yep. We bring this down. All right, let's annex another 0. I believe they're just annexing zeros here. Let's just check. All right. We can't have 9 2/10 remainder anything, so we keep going. So 4 goes into 25 times. 5 times 4 is 20. We subtract. Now we can stop with 9 25/100. All right. Looking at the bottom, we're going to estimate quotients when we get down to number 9 to 16. But let's just make sure we can work these because you're going to have some assignments that they've started working the problems for you. So, for example, number 5, we know that we're dividing 6 not into 4 because they put a 0 there. We're going into 45. 6 goes into 45. How many times? Yep, you got it. 7 times. 7 times 6 is 42. We subtract. We get 3. 3 is less than 6. We're in good shape. They have brought down that 6. Now we start again with our steps. And if you want to remember them, you can make a note here. They're divide, multiply, subtract, bring down. You're done if you don't have anything else to after you subtract, or you have to go back and start again, right? In this case, we go back and start again with division. So 6 goes into 36 6 times. 6 times 6 is 36. We don't have a remainder. We're done. Our answer is 76/100. All right, number 6. We divide 5 into 32. Goes 6 times. 6 times 5 is 30. Subtract, we get 2. All right, they've got a 0 here. Where did that 0 come from? It comes from annexing a 0 and bringing it down. All right, 5 goes into 24 times. 4 times 5 is 20. We're done. All right, 7 does not go into 2. It goes into 20, and it goes into 22 times. 2 times 7 is 14. When we subtract, we get 6. 6 is less than 7, so we're good to bring down the 3. 7 goes into 63 9 times. 9 times 7 is 63. We end with 0. 2 9/10 is our quotient. And the last one, we're dividing 4 into 33. All right, 4 goes into 33 8 times. 8 times 4 is 32. We subtract. 1 is less than 4, so we're ready to bring down that 8. All right, we divide. 4 goes into 18 4 times. 4 times 4 is 16. We subtract. We get 2. 2 is less than 4. We're ready to bring down, and they're wanting us to annex a 0 so that we can keep going. All right. 4 goes into 25 times. 5 times 4 is 20. We subtract, we get 0. So we have divided numbers 3 through 8 all the way until we end with a 0. But if the problem does not end with a 0 and you have 2 digits behind the decimal point, then what you're going to see us doing is annexing those zeros Once we get a digit in the thousandths place, we can stop and we round our number to the nearest hundredth, okay? So you'll see me working some of those. So 9 through 16, I would say pause the video, set them up, find your estimated quotient first, divide, see how you're doing, and if you get stuck, come back and look at my work. We're dividing 19 by 5. As you notice, I used the numbers 20 divided by 5 to get an overestimate of 4. So that meant that when I divided 5 into 19, I would get 3. 3 times 5 was 15. I subtracted and I had this 4. So what I had to do was annex a decimal point and a 0. Don't forget, we pop up the decimal point into our quotient, and then we continue dividing. We end with 0 with the answer 3 8/10. Number 10, you can look at 10 and 11. Those are pretty straightforward. All right. Number 12, you had to annex a little bit here. So with 62 being divided by 8, I used the compatible number 64 divided by 8 to get an overestimate of 8. So when I divided, I know my answer is less than 8, so 7 is reasonable for my first digit. All right. When I subtracted, when I divided 62 divided by 8, I had a remainder of 6. So when I am working with decimal numbers, I'm going to make this 62 decimal. I'm going to annex this 0, pop the 0 up into my quotient, bring the 0 down. 8 goes into 67. 7 times 8 is 56. I subtract and get a 4. I need to keep going, so I annexed another 0, brought it down. 8 went into 45 times. 5 times 8 is 40. My decimal stops there, so I get the quotient 7 75/100ths. On the back, number 13, pretty straightforward. Number 14 required us to annex a decimal and a 0 to finish this problem up with the quotient 12 5/10. And number 15 and 16 were straightforward as well. So if you need to go back and look at those problems and look at those solutions, go ahead. All right. The main thing that you need to remember when you're dividing a decimal by a whole number is you need to get an estimate first. You need to pop up your decimal point. You need to keep dividing until you end with a 0 or until you have 3 digits behind the decimal place, and then you would round it to the nearest hundredth. We didn't run into any of that yet, but that's a preview of what's to come. All right, so good luck with your dividing a decimal by a whole number. Come visit with me in our video chat if you're having trouble with this concept. If not, go ahead and get started on your independent practice. All right, boys and girls, have a great day, and I will talk to you a little later.